Cool, thank you. Are you running a prize for the best background?
Oh, you and you're the host.
Cool.
כן, יש בהורדות.
Cyril, Tommy Monk, you're recording. I can see it. That's cool. I'm also recording.
דסקטופ, יופי, מצד ימין. אופן. אופן.
בשל, עכשיו תן לי את הגיבור.
לא, תשאיר את זה
We will wait 2 more minutes for guys that are
How are
late.
you? תמשיך, בוא תמשיך מפה.
טוב, תן לי לסיים את השולחן.
חבר'ה, בבקשה תעשו מיוט כולם, כל מי שהם זה. חבר'ה, תעשו מיוט.
עשתה את המיוט אול, ואז יפתח מי שרוצה לדבר.
Mute everyone but me.
I'll try.
זה בארצה.
לא, זה עכשיו אתה יכול לדבר ושומעים.
הלו.
רון, אתה שומע?
Unmuted now.
טוב, אני מניח שיהיו עוד חבר'ה שיאחרו, אנחנו לא רוצים לעכב פה גם כן את יואן. שומעים אותי כולם? אתם לא יכולים לדבר. אוקיי, סתם. בכל מקרה, ניתן עוד 2-3 דקות כדי שאנשים שמאחרו יוכלו להצטרף, וניתן ליואן להתחיל להעביר את ההרצאה / טעימה הזאת. אז בינתיים בואו נחכה קצת. בואו נחכה נגיד 8:05. Ewan will wait till 8:05 and then we'll start. Is it okay with you?
Yeah, that's good with me. We are on Irish time. Nothing starts on time in Ireland. Relax. As you might hear from my accent, I'm not Irish. I'm
So where are you from? So
I'm from Scotland.
Oh, okay. So there is a problem for us to, you know, to understand the differences between Irish and Scottish accent.
Yeah, so tune into Scottish accent and be ready to taste Irish whiskey. It's confusing.
I thought your accent was Irish, you know. When I was in Ireland, guys were talking among themselves and I couldn't understand shit from them, you know. I couldn't understand it. When they were talking to me, I understood them. But when they were talking to other among themselves, no way I could understand it.
Yeah, they talk very fast.
Yeah, and
when you go
you know,
to rural areas, they have their own accents that especially the older people, some of them I just can't understand.
I actually had a lot of guys from the US with me. They said that they can understand me better than they can understand them.
Yeah. Oh, so I've got lots of people to admit into the room here, so I better do that.
We have only 13 participants right now. All 16, 17. You have to approve, guys, you know, right now, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
So we have 18 right now. And I know about 3 or 4 guys that won't be here. So 1 more minute.
איפה הפרטנר של שלומי? שלומי אלה.
אדי, מה המצב, אחי?
אהלן, ערב טוב.
מתי הצטרפת, עכשיו?
כן, כן.
הוא עם מבטא סקוטי, אחי, יהיה קשה להבין אותו.
יש לי מבטא רוסי, גם אותי קשה להבין.
כן, אבל אתה צועק אותו, אז הם מבינים אותך מצוין.
אתה נמצא פה, תומר.
כן, הוא מנתן.
תוך כדי ניתוח, אני מבקש שתצלם לנו את הקרביים של הבן אדם. אוקיי? תגיד, יש מצב שתעקוב אחרי הוואטסאפ? תסתכל כאילו שם, קשה לי לעקוב אחרי הכל.
רגע, מי פה ב...
אדי, מה אתה שותה שם כבר, אדי?
באמת, טל סקרפור.
טלי סקרפור, וואי, אחי, לא הספקת להתחיל, אתה מעושן? תשתה סודה, אחי, בטונות עכשיו. אחי, זה יגמור לך את הפה.
איפה שמעון? איפה שמעון, יא נקניק?
הוא בא, הוצאתי שם.
אלק, תאמין לי.
אלכס, חביבי, מה עם הרקע? שים רקע.
אין,
חמוד.
אבוד, לא מצליח לשנות אותו, התפוצץ העולם.
מה הבעיה?
לך יש אישו.
גם אני לא הצלחתי עם הרקע.
דילג טכנולוגי, לא משנה.
הוא לא עובד, הטכנולוגיה...
הזום פה לא משנה אצלי את הרקע, לא עוזר כלום.
יש לך זום...
עם הטלפון?
יש לי זום של ילדים, מה אתה ב?
So we're 1 minute late. So we give the honor to him.
תשתיק את כולם, אחי. תשתיק את כולם.
Ewan, you can silence everyone and start with the event itself. Guys, let's go.
יאללה.
Right,
Let's go, שלומי.
I'll just sort out the technology.
Yes.
Oh, there's another. Okay, I'll start off then. Good evening, everyone. This is incredibly exciting for me to be doing a whiskey tasting in Israel, but from Ireland. Thanks very much.
Don't hear you.
Can't hear. Can you hear? Yeah, good. Thumbs
אפשר
up.
לשמוע, פשוט מני תגביה טיפה את המחשב אצלך, כי אצלי לדוגמה שומעים מצוין.
Cool. So, yeah, if you can't hear me at any point or something goes wrong, just start waving at the camera and I'll probably spot you and I'll try and fix it. Yeah, so my name is Ewan.
לא שומעים אותו.
Hold on. So my name is Ewan. I am the manager of the visitor centre at Clonakilty distillery. But as part of that role, I do a lot of brand ambassador work, talking about whiskey at different events. I am also a member of our local whiskey society. So I have another tasting tomorrow night that I'm doing for them, but that's not on Clonakilty whiskey. That's on Scottish whiskey because we're having our Burns supper to celebrate Robert Burns and drink Scotch and eat haggis. So what I'd like to do, if I can get this to work, I'm going to play a very short video just to give you an idea of our location in Ireland. As the video plays, I think it's only 3 minutes long. As it plays, have a little nose and sip of sample number 2. We're going to leave sample number 1 to the very end of the tasting because it's new make spirit at a higher ABV. So sample number 1 we'll leave to the end. Sample number 2 will be our first whiskey. It's the double oak finish whiskey. So as you're watching the video, don't hold out on having a nose and a sip. Enjoy the whiskey and as you enjoy the video, and then I'll talk about the whiskey after the video. So hopefully this will work if I get to share this. Cool. Share. And hopefully you can see and hear this video.
The story of Clonakilty Distillery starts just outside the town at the Gallyhead Lighthouse, an area of incredible natural beauty. Our fields at the foot of the lighthouse are the perfect environment to nurture and grow the finest of barley, exclusively for
Sorry, folks. I think it's my rural internet.
Our own
There we go.
uniquely Irish
Can you see the video?
single pot still whiskey. Centuries of sea mist, soft rain, and salty ocean spray provide a complexity to the soil that permeates right through to each individual grain. The Scully family, founders of Clonakilty Distillery, have farmed this coastal land for 320 years and 8 successive generations. As custodians of this majestical slice of coastline, we trust our soil, our Atlantic maritime climate, and our untouched water aquifers. At the distillery, here at the waterfront in Clonakilty, we use this barley, in addition to barley carefully sourced from local farmers, to produce our own distinctive new make spirit. Our 3 beautiful copper pot stills have been handmade to perfection by the family of firm of Barrison in Italy, who have a tradition of craftsmanship of more than 100 years. Specifically designed for a triple distilled Irish pot still whisky, the still house is largely manually operated, just giving Paul, our head distiller, the opportunity to fine-tune and lovingly handcraft each individual batch. The tall neck stills naturally produce an elegant spirit, while the unique mixture of malted and unmalted barley will give the spirit its wonderful complexity that can only be achieved from an Irish single pot still. For cutting our new make spirit, we source the purest of water from our own dedicated well at the Scully family farm. Remote and unspoiled, the water is drawn from deep within the ancient rock formations by our ocean cliffs. Cold, unadulterated freshness, generously gifted by Mother Nature herself. This cutting and cask filling is done on the family farm at our Atlantic Ocean warehouse, 200 feet above sea level by the cliff edge. It is where we mature the finest of whiskies. Pure, clean air, transported across thousands of miles of Atlantic Ocean, providing a freshness unspoilt by human intervention. This is a magical place with a unique and special diversity of climate. Like the ocean itself, it is ever-changing, from the wild Atlantic storms to the glass-calm reflections of a perfect summer's day. In this dynamic, natural environment, a whiskey will only sleep for a short while, instead interacting with the wood and the angels to develop a unique and distinct maritime flavour. Just as the alcohol vapour evaporates from our barrels, the sea salt-laden air permeates through the wood, over time imparting its unique flavour to the whiskey inside. After 320 years of farming the land at the known, we're used to living on the edge of Europe in a place apart. Now is the time to embark on a new journey, to give something back, to share, to craft spirits that feed the soul. We invite you to join with us on this very special journey.
So I hope you could all see the video and hear it there. And the video, okay, there's a bit of marketing spin in there about the water and all of that every distillery loves its marketing spin. But for me, the video is amazing, just so you can get an idea of the coastline that we have here in Clonakilty. So you're all tasting well, hopefully you're nosing and tasting our single batch double oak. But before I talk about the whiskey, a quick run through of Clonakilty Distillery and how it started and where we are as a business now. So Clonakilty Distillery is the idea and creation of Michael Scully, and it was Michael that you heard on the video talking about the business. He's a farmer. He's been farming, his family have been farming the same land for 320 years. So Michael is 8th generation of his family farming there, and his children who all work in the business, they're the 9th generation on that area. The main part of the farm is a dairy herd, so he's milking cows, but he also has barley fields where he's growing barley that we use in the distillery. So Michael started the business in 2016. Clonakilty Distillery opened, it was commissioned in March 2019. Okay? Irish whiskey is the same as Scotch whiskey. It must mature in a wooden barrel for a minimum period of 3 years. So the whiskey you're drinking, because we don't have a time machine, this whiskey did not come out the stills that you've seen in that video. So the way to think of Clonakilty at the moment, I think of it as an independent bottler. You know, the big independent bottlers in Scotland like Cadenhead, Signatory. The Clonakilty Distillery at the moment has bought whiskey from 3 other Irish distilleries, and we are blending that. We're continuing to mature it in our warehouse. We're blending and we're finishing it in different barrel types to create different whiskies. This is happening all over Ireland. So when you see a name on a bottle of Irish whiskey, it is completely different from how you would think about it in terms of Scotch. Scotch whiskey, if you see Edredour on the label, it's from the Edredour distillery. If you see Glenfiddich on the label, it's from the Glenfiddich distillery. Highland Park, the same. In Ireland, there are now 33 working whiskey distilleries producing spirit, but there are only around 7 that have spirit that is mature enough to call it whiskey. So all these new distilleries, all these new brands, they buy whiskey, they source whiskey from 5 different distilleries that have got enough mature spirit to sell on. Now, part of the contract when we buy the whiskey from the distilleries is that we don't name them. However, as I say, there's 5 distilleries in Ireland that have got whiskey mature enough to sell in bulk to other brands. We have Bushmills, which is in Northern Ireland. We have the Cooley Distillery, which sits between Belfast and Dublin. We have the Great Northern Distillery, which is only about 5 years old, but their main purpose is selling spirit to other companies. We've got the Middleton Distillery, that is the home of Jameson Irish whiskey, the biggest selling Irish whiskey in the world. And we have West Cork Distillers that are about 30 minutes drive west from Clonakilty. So Bushmills, Cooley Distillery, Great Northern Distillery, Middleton Distillery, and West Cork Distillers. We didn't buy whiskey from West Cork Distillers, and we didn't buy whiskey from the Cooley Distillery. But I can't tell you the 3 that we did buy from, because that would be against the rules. Okay? So I don't hide anything from anybody, but we don't name it directly. So what you have in your glass is a blend. It's a blend of young malt whiskey, about 4.5 years old, and grain whiskey, which is about 9 years old now. Both of those whiskies, when we purchased them in ex-American oak bourbon barrels, ex-bourbon barrels. We blend, we put the blend from those barrels into two different cask types. We use virgin American oak, and we used refurbished European oak wine barrels. A barrel that's now called a NEOC, N-E-O-C, meaning new era of cask. So it's fresh European oak. So the finish is American oak, virgin American oak, and rejuvenated European oak. So you get the classic nice, sweet, vanilla, honey, toffee character from the American oak, and from the European oak, you get those nice spices. So when you do nose it, if you've still got any in your glass, or even, I always say to people actually, my best tasting notes for what I smell is from the empty glass. Once I've finished a whiskey, don't wash out your glass. Leave it sitting for 15, 20 minutes, then go back to the glass and smell it, because all the alcohol's gone. So you don't have the alcohol confusing your senses. You can just smell the different aromas. But when I smell this, I smell honey. Honey and vanilla, and a bit of apple in there as well. Yeah, everyone tastes different, which is one of the things I love about Irish whiskey. I could sit here and tell you anything I liked about the smell of this, and I wouldn't be wrong. If you're new to whiskey, if anyone mentions American oak, you can always guess vanilla. That's a good tip for impressing someone at a whiskey tasting. If someone puts you on the spot and says, "What do you smell?" Go with vanilla. If it's ever been an American oak, which probably 90% of Scotch whiskies or 90% of Irish whiskies, certainly they'll have been an American oak at some time. In Scotch, you might have the odd one that's only ever been in a sherry butt and a sherry cask. But yeah, vanilla. And then when you taste it, it's 43% ABV. Have a little taste, folks, if you haven't already. It's sweet at the tip of your tongue, and then you get this flash of pepper at the back, kind of nice peppery spice. I call this our whiskey. For me, as a Scotsman, it tastes like a whiskey should taste. It's vanilla, it's caramel, there might be a touch of apple in there, but not too much. It tastes like a whiskey should taste. This is my go-to from the Clonakilty range, and it's our core whiskey. Bottled at 43% alcohol by volume. It is non-chill filtered, and we don't use any caramel colouring. At 43%, there is a risk that this whiskey may go cloudy if it's cold or if you have it over ice. Now, I don't tell anyone how to drink their whiskey. If you want it with water, have it with water. If you want it with ice, have it with ice. If you want it with Coca-Cola, have it with Coke, but just don't tell anybody, okay? Keep that a secret to yourselves. Some people tell me that the only thing you should add to whiskey is more whiskey. I wouldn't disagree with that, but yeah, you whiskey should be savoured and enjoyed. It's not for drinking lots and lots of. That's me done my responsibility. But so yeah, it's non-chill filtered. Chill filtration is a process that a lot of distilleries do. A lot of the big distilleries do, and it's done for aesthetic reasons. It's done so that the whiskey doesn't go cloudy if you have it in ice, or if the whiskey goes cold. The way you do it is actually cool down the whiskey before you put it in a bottle, and the fats and proteins within the liquid within the whiskey go semi-solid, and they'll stick to a mesh filter. That will stop it glowing cloudy. But if you're removing fats and other things from the whiskey, surely you're removing flavour as well. It's like cutting fat off a piece of meat. And cooking it is a completely different thing from having the fat on the meat. So I think if you're chill filtering, you've got to be removing flavour. The other way to stop your whiskey going cloudy is to bottle it at 46% alcohol by volume or higher. That much alcohol will stop the whiskey going cloudy. 46% ABV is quite high for a non-whiskey drinker that's tasting a whiskey for the first time. So we decided not to go as high as 46 with our core range. We want people to be we want our whiskey to be accessible so people can pick up a glass, they can nose it and taste it and enjoy it without going, oh, that's burning my throat. So we decided to bottle at 43. That will go some way towards stopping going it cloudy, but this whiskey could go cloudy. We call it Irish mist. If it goes misty in the glass, it goes cloudy. It doesn't affect the flavour, and the flavour is more important than the look. So hopefully that gives you an idea of why that's bottled at 43%. This, the double oak whiskey, it comes with a blue label. I've got a miniature one here. It comes with a blue label on it. This one, best blended Irish whiskey at the World Whiskies Awards 2020. So last year we got best blended Irish whiskey, which is huge. When you think about the big brands, the one I mentioned earlier has been the most popular Irish whiskey in the world. It's a blend. You know, to get best blended Irish in the world is fantastic. We also won best Irish new make spirit at the 2020 World Whiskies Awards. And yeah, I'll talk more about the actual distillery and the new make at the end of our tasting. Now, if anyone does have questions, do pop them in the chat and I'll try and keep an eye on them. I'm also just making sure there's no one waiting to come in. So yeah, I hope you've all had a little taste of that. Just as well, I'm using two different glasses. I'm using this glass, which is called a Tua glass, designed specifically for nosing and tasting Irish whiskey. But I'm also using the Scottish Glencairn glass. It's just down to preference what people enjoy. Normally, if I'm just drinking a whiskey, it'll be in a tumbler without ice. So single batch, double oak, single batch, that's a term that I am campaigning to get removed from the bottle. I'm really honest, folks, so there's no questions that I won't try and answer. For me, there's nothing to hide. That's why right at the start I was telling you all about this didn't come out our distillery. We're an independent bottler until our own whiskey is mature. But the single batch on the bottle, I'd like to see that removed because for me it doesn't mean anything. As soon as you see single on a whiskey, you're thinking it's a single malt, a single grain, or a single pot still, which I'll talk about in a bit, an Irish style. That means it came from a single distillery. Single batch on the label, it doesn't mean it came from a single distillery. It's a blend of whiskies, different whiskies from different distilleries. It just means it's done in batches. So normally when we're doing a run of 700 ml bottles, we'll do between 600 and 1,800 bottles on a run. Small batch would probably have been a better term, but what's small in terms of bottling, and the Teeling distillery in Dublin, their core blend is called the Teeling small batch. So I guess that's why the guys at Clonakilty distillery were a bit hesitant to use small batch. But yeah, I'd just like to see single batch dropped. doesn't tell you anything.
Maybe because this is single batch, meaning there won't be another one from the same combination of barrels, maybe? This is the reason why they use it, or?
Yeah, but
Single batch, but will be something the same on the next batches. Then it's not good.
yeah, I mean, each batch will be different. We're not going for consistency like the big blends would go for. Our head distiller, who's also our head blender, Paul Corbett, he tries to improve on the previous batch. So he's not necessarily going for consistency. He wants to get it better.
This is perfect.
From the portfolio of casks that he's got in the warehouse. But yeah, single batch, it's just a bit of marketing, I think, more than it actually tells you anything. So if we move on to the next one, which is your sample number 3, Bordeaux cask.
Maybe you can throw a few words about the Irish whiskey itself and the use of malted and unmalted barley and.
Absolutely. So this next whiskey is it's down on your tasting mat as a Bordeaux cask, but it's a single grain whiskey. Is probably the first thing to mention. So single grain whiskies, not made in copper pot stills normally. Some people do, but very rarely as a single grain whiskey made in a copper pot still. It's normally made in a continuous still, a column still, and it's normally made in Ireland from corn, from maize. Some Irish distilleries are using wheat, but the vast majority of single grain whiskey produced in Ireland is produced on a column still. It runs continuously. You feed corn wash in the top, you feed steam in the bottom, and it's constantly doing mini distillations, and you can draw off your spirit at different alcoholic strengths. A column still is what they would use to make vodka or neutral spirit, because you can get it right up to 96% alcohol by volume. You can't get that high in a copper pot still. So column still grain whiskey. Again, we purchased this and it was all in ex-bourbon barrels, but then we put it into ex-red wine casks from Bordeaux. So that's why it's got the Bordeaux cask finish. I think of this as my dessert whiskey, okay? Or in Scotland, I'd say pudding for dessert, you know, a strawberry cheesecake, a good Scottish dish actually for Burns, a raspberry Clonakilty. It's raspberries, it's oats, fresh cream, honey and whiskey, all in a bowl. This would go beautiful with that. So it smells like red berries. Oh, a bit of rhubarb, that kind of thing. Think red fruit, red berries, and then on the taste.
The taste, it's amazing. Wow.
It's strawberries and cream. It works so well with ice cream. Using a red wine barrel to finish a single grain whiskey, there's very few done that way in Ireland. And the finish was only about 5 months. So took the single grain whiskey, maybe from 3 or 4 different ex-bourbon barrels, vatted that together and then transferred it into the red wine barrels. And the inside of the barrels, they're proper reds. You know, it's amazing, the colour. On the colour of the whiskey, actually, it's almost got a kind of rose gold colour to it if you hold it up to a light. And the single grain whiskies tend to be lighter in character to malt whiskies. They're certainly cheaper to make because they're done in these continuous industrial type stills. And that's why you find that most cheap blended whiskey has got a very high grain, single grain component because it's cheaper and more accessible. It's slightly lighter than the kind of big, heavy malt whiskies. So we had a blend, which was a blend of malt whiskey and grain whiskey. We're tasting a single grain at the moment. And those styles of whiskey, malt whiskey and grain whiskey, would be distilled in Ireland and in Scotland. Ireland's got this additional style of whiskey, and it's called a single pot still whiskey. So it's very similar to single malt, produced in exactly the same way, but it's produced not using 100% malted barley. It's produced using malted barley and unmalted barley. Using unmalted barley in your mash bill when you're making a whiskey gives the finished whiskey more complexity of spices on the palate, and it also gives it an amazing mouthfeel. It's kind of oily. It coats your mouth, you know, you can almost chew on it, a single pot still whiskey. Our founder at Clonakilty, Michael Scully, is a big single pot still whiskey fan, as am I. The biggest selling single pot still whiskey is a brand called Redbreast, made by Middleton Distillery, the guys that make Jameson. They also make the Spot range of pot still whiskies: Green Spot, Yellow Spot, Red Spot, and now Blue Spot. And they do some Powers single pot still whiskey. Powers John's Lane is one of them. So single pot still whiskey, I believe, is the whiskey that's going to change the future of Irish whiskey. This is the type of whiskey that's going to give the Scots a run for their money. Oh, there's a bottle of Red Spot. Nice. Not a cheap bottle to buy. Red Spot. It's a 15-year-old, was released a couple of years ago, maybe. Really, really good.
3 years ago, yes.
Yeah, it's the mouth feel. It's this silky, oily coating that you get with a pot still whiskey. So because that's Michael Scully, our founder's favourite whiskey, at the moment, Clonakilty Distillery is a single pot still distillery, a single pot still whiskey distillery. So it's not made in a single pot still, it's made in a single distillery, and we're triple distilling all our spirit. So that's another common myth about Irish whiskey compared to Scottish whiskey. Irish whiskey can be double distilled or triple distilled. All Irish whiskey is not triple distilled. And the opposite in Scotland, Scotch whiskey can be double distilled or triple distilled. The vast majority of Scotch whiskey is double distilled. There's only one distillery in Scotland triple distills absolutely everything that they produce, and that's Auchentoshan, from just outside Glasgow. But there are other distilleries in Scotland that distill some of their whiskey 3 times. Mortlach and Speyside is one. They do a combination of double and triple and somewhere in between.
They call it 2.8 or something like this.
That's right, yeah, it's 2.8. That's too complicated for me, especially when I'm drinking whiskey. Yeah, so it's 2.81 times distilled Mortlach whiskey. They call it the Beast of Speyside. It's a real pungent, meaty whiskey. Yeah, you need big, bold flavours. Quite different to this single grain that we're tasting just now. So someone says number 3 is really good. Does that mean number 3, the second whiskey, or have you jumped on to the next whiskey? I guess it's.
We're using numbers. Number 3 is the Bordeaux cask. Yeah.
Number 3, cool. Yeah.
Ewan, number 3, the boardwalks is very good.
Yeah.
Also, the double oak is
Yeah.
very good. They go smoothly in the throat.
Yeah, the word smooth is something that's often associated with Irish whiskey. It tends to be lighter than Scotch. And Irish whiskey, the majority of Irish whiskey is not smoky. So they're not peated. It's an area that a lot of the new Irish whiskey companies are moving into because they know smoky, peaty whiskies are a decent sized market, so they want part of that market. I would rather Irish distilleries didn't do peated whiskey. One, because I don't like it, and two, because leave it to Scotland. Let's have Ireland as a separate thing. I don't mind a whiskey with a tiny bit of peat character to it, but if it's all about the peat, like Lafroig or Octomore or those big ones, it's just too much for me. Maybe I'll grow into it a bit more as I keep going.
We have a lot of guys that like peaty whiskey. In Israel, we have a lot of guys that like peaty whiskey. We are peat lovers.
It's the same in Scotland and in Ireland. That's why the Irish distilleries are moving more to trying to do peated or turf, as we'd call it in Ireland. Turf.
You have, I think that also Tilling got peated whiskey recently.
Yeah, so Tilling did a whiskey called the Black Pits.
Yes.
Named after an area of Dublin just behind the distillery. Now, I like that one actually. I shouldn't be bigging up another Irish whiskey brand, but the Teeling Black Pits is
something very, very unique. Yeah, dessert wine. Yeah, the Sauterne casks.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of sweet wine finishes. Sauterne, Madeira, those kind of sweet. It's just, everyone's got different tastes. Our head distiller was asking me yesterday about my favourite cask finishes. He's looking for different ideas for different bottlings, and I kind of said to him, I don't like cask finishes. And cask finishes, they're very popular in Ireland because it allows companies like ourselves at Clonakilty to buy whiskey from other distilleries and change it in a short period of time, say 3 months to 6 months, by finishing it. But cask finishes aren't really that common in Scotland. They're becoming more common now because the Scottish companies are seeing the potential. But when you've got old distilleries that have been distilling for 50, 80, 100 years, they don't need a cask finish to do something different. They've got whiskey that was matured for its whole life in a sherry butt or a bourbon barrel. So yeah, finishes are an interesting one. Very popular just now in Ireland is using beer barrels. Oh, is that Carlisle there? Yeah, smoky. I mean, smoky whiskies that I like, Highland Park, I really like from Orkney in Scotland, because the peat, the turf on Orkney is, there we go, bottle Highland Park, cool. The turf is from heather that's broken down over centuries, millennia, whatever. Whereas, and the reason for that is they don't have trees on Orkney. Whereas a lot of the other smoky Scotch whiskies, it's wood that's broken down to form the peat, and that then transfers through into the whiskey. So yeah, a light smoky whiskey, a Highland smoked whiskey is what I like. And some of the new Irish ones are pretty cool. So I'm glad that you liked the first two. Will we jump on to the third one? Number 4. Now this is back to being a blend. And it's pretty much the same blend as the first whiskey that we tasted. It's a blend of single grain whiskey and single malt whiskey. But instead of putting it into virgin oak and refurbished European oak, we've put this into port pipes, port casks. And port will give you very similar character and flavours to sherry casks. They're not as expensive as sherry casks, which is one reason to use them. But I also find that a lot of sherry cask finished whiskies can have a sharpness to them, and I don't find that as much with port. So going from the light single grain whiskey up to this port cask finish blend. Again, it's bottled at 43% ABV, non-chill filtered, no camel colouring. And this whiskey, this is the reason that we changed our filtration process in the distillery. This was one of the first whiskies we bottled, along with the double oak, single batch double oak finish. And they were running it through an industry standard filter, which I can't remember how many microns it is, but it's a fairly fine filter. I think something like it'll filter down to 6 microns. And when they ran it through the filter and then they took the filter out, the filter was red. It had gone from white to red. So not only had it stripped out colour, it must have been taken out flavours. So we don't chill filter any of our whiskies, but we also practice minimum filtration on all our whiskies. So we don't use as fine a mesh filter as most distilleries would use. I think normally about 6 microns. We allow it to go through up to 30 microns. And that allows all that colour to go through and into your finished whiskey. Yeah, so this is fuller. I think of it as a more rounded whiskey. The dried fruits, bit of like fig, something like that in there. Have a little taste if you haven't already. Don't wait on me, lads. Have a sip whenever you want one. For me, it's more balanced than the first two. There's flavour all around my palate. There's a bit of dryness, kind of like tannin dryness at the sides of my tongue. But yeah, it's almost like a Christmas cake. You know, winter spices, dried fruit, those kind of, there's a very similar thing in Ireland they call a plum pudding. But yeah, in Scotland, a fruit loaf is what I would call it, a fruit cake made in a square tin, almost like a loaf of bread. But yeah, the port cask whiskey, just love this, especially, I don't know what the weather and the temperature's like in Israel, but especially in Ireland just now, you want a nice, warming, rich, fruity whiskey. Now, there's another thing that we do differently from most distilleries. When we cut the whiskey for bottling, we use water from our well that's on the family farm. Now, the fact that it comes from the well doesn't make any difference. Too many distilleries, in my opinion, talk and talk about the quality of the water that they use. And the quality of the water that they use doesn't actually make that much difference. When you're in the distillery, you're distilling it 3 times. So you're removing a lot of character, any character that the water had at all. It matters for when you're talking about fermentation, for how your quality of fermentation and the yield that you can get from it. But when you're talking about cutting whiskey, diluting whiskey out the barrels from, say, maybe 56, 58% alcohol by volume, when you're diluting that down to 43% to go into a bottle, the water that you use must be demineralized. It must go through a process called reverse osmosis, and that is because it's illegal to add any flavor at that point. And if you were using water that hadn't been treated, you're potentially adding flavor. So the water from our well goes through reverse osmosis, it's demineralized, it is neutral, it has got no flavor, and that's a legal requirement in Ireland and in Scotland. The reason it comes from the well is there's no other water out on the warehouse that's located on the farm. There is no mains water, so it must come from a well. But try and stop our marketing department going on and on about the quality of the water. And it is fantastic quality, but it doesn't actually really add anything to your whiskey. However, the way that we use the water makes a difference. We don't dilute the whiskey in one go. We add the water to the whiskey over a period of 2 weeks. It's a process that we call the gentle cut. So we'll add some water to the whiskey. Paul, the head distiller and blender, will leave it for a couple of days and he'll check the ABV. Then he'll add a drop more water. And the thought is that if you add all the water to the whiskey in one go, you'll shock the whiskey and you can make it either a bit harsh or you can make it slightly soapy. And we don't want that to happen. We've waited over 3 years for the stuff to mature. Let's not rush the final stage. Just take that extra 2 weeks and do it gently. And a lot of people struggle to get the idea of this and think, is it a marketing gimmick? But if you take 1 litre of alcohol and you add 1 litre of water to that alcohol, you do not get 2 litres of liquid because the molecules are different sizes. You get less than 2 litres. We would do it at school in Scotland. Although maybe they didn't let us do it with alcohol, I can't remember. But yeah, you don't get 2 litres. And if those molecules are fitting together, then there's potentially a reaction happening. And we don't fully understand that reaction. But yeah, we do a gentle cut over a period of 2 weeks.
Actually, we had a tour in Milk and Honey in Israel. It's a Israeli distillery. They explained that they use a reverse osmosis. We couldn't actually understand why, but now we do understand because of the flavoring thing and the mineral. So I don't think that the Israeli rules, coexist with the Scottish rules, but it's probably, in Israel, maybe because of, they explain that the water in Tel Aviv is shitty. And they used to, they filter it for them, for the pot stills not to get clogged, and maybe because of, how do you call it, Avnit? Calc, calcium, yes.
Yes, yeah, if the water's too hard or too soft, it can have you can build up a residue inside the equipment. The water in Clonakilty isn't great. It's treated too much. The mains water, they over treat it in Ireland. But as I say, when you're actually distilling with it, it doesn't make that much of a difference. So yeah, port cask. The casks that we use, we buy them through cask merchants. So we have there's a cooperage in America that we buy all our American oak barrels from. So we're not buying them from one particular distillery. They'll buy barrels back from distilleries. They might retoast them. They'll check them for quality. They'll grade them in terms of quality. We'll buy from that cooperage. And we also use a guy in Bordeaux. Sorry?
But you do know which, when you're buying from the cooperage in the US, you do know which distilleries you get the barrels from.
Yeah, most of them are stamped.
Stamped, yeah. So what, it's Buffalo Trace or
Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
I've seen a few Buffalo Trace ones.
Yeah.
But say again?
So it's mixed. You don't have the same bourbon barrels all the time.
No, yeah, it's mixed. Yeah, and we don't necessarily segregate them. It's not the whiskey that was in the barrel that's important. It's the quality of the white American oak that's important. I always think about bourbon as only going into the barrel to remove the rubbish stuff out the wood before we get it in Ireland. Yeah. I don't know. We might have bourbon drinkers in the tasting as well as smoky drinkers. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, American whiskey's an area that I don't have much knowledge in. I've tried a few. I've tried some Canadian whiskies. But I've got too much whiskey in Ireland and Scotland to think about trying American whiskies. But the Irish whiskey industry and the Scotch whiskey industry, we rely on America because we're using their barrels. In America, they're only allowed to use the barrel once, and then they must get rid of it. And they get rid of it by selling it to us, which is great. And the only reason that they're restricted to using the barrel once, it was a law brought in to protect the coopers that make the barrels. To keep them in a job, the law was passed that you can only use a barrel once. It means it's very restrictive for them. In Ireland, we can use all sorts of different barrels. That's another interesting one. There is a difference between the Scotch whisky technical file and the Irish whisky technical file, that the Scotch technical file says that it must be matured in an oak barrel for a minimum of 3 years. And the Irish technical file says whisky must be matured in a wooden barrel for a minimum of 3 years. So in Ireland, there are some whiskies that have been finished using chestnut or acacia wood. They're using other wood types to mature whiskey or to finish the maturation.
Do you know which one? Do we have any knowledge of which distilleries use chestnut wood, or because this is very interesting, something that's not common in the whiskey industry. It's something very, very interesting.
So Middleton Distillery did one. Irish Distillers, the home of Jameson. Middleton Distillery did one. It's part of their Method and Madness series.
Oh, yes, yes.
I think it was a single pot still whiskey that they finished in chestnut. The problem with chestnut is it's a lot more porous than oak.
There's a lot of angel share.
Yeah, if you leave it too long, you'll get a lot of angel share, and you'll also get the devil's cut. You'll get, they'll start to leak.
Really?
Yeah, they're so porous. So what Middleton had to do was mature it, finish it for a short period. You couldn't mature it in chestnut for 10 years or 12 years. But what they also did was made the thickness of the staves twice as thick as an oak stave. so that it would take the liquid much longer to progress through the wood. So they've used chestnut, acacia. The Bushmills distillery did a distillery exclusive using acacia wood. And I think Cologne Distillery, that are a small new distillery in Northern Ireland, I think they may have done something with acacia wood. Oak's the most popular because oak gives you nice flavors, it's strong, and it's porous enough to let the barrel breathe but not let it leak. So yeah, there's a reason why oak is being used so much and why other woods haven't been used. There isn't much Irish oak used because we don't have that many Irish oak trees left. One of the few distilleries to use Irish oak, again, was the Middleton Distillery, and a bottling called Dar Gaelach, which is Irish for Irish oak. But yeah.
Who used this Irish oak, you said?
Middleton again.
Okay. They're very innovative in this. They're trying to do a lot of exciting and new things.
Yeah, they obviously noticed that the Irish whiskey industry was booming and they would need to keep up with everyone else experimenting. I think it's the first time I've ever had a parrot at a tasting.
What?
I can see a parrot on a screen.
A parrot?
Yeah. It's got a parrot. There's definitely a parrot on a screen. Or I'm seeing things. It's too much whiskey. Yeah. Middleton, very innovative. They needed to be to keep up with all the new distilleries. I should say, when I was talking about there's only 5 Irish distilleries that have got whiskey for sale to other new distilleries. Irish whiskey used to be more popular than Scotch whiskey. There used to be 88 working distilleries in Ireland. And it was really through no fault of the Irish distilleries that the industry was almost wiped out due to prohibition in America. America was the biggest market for Irish whiskey, still is. That had a huge effect. The 2 world wars meant it was difficult to distribute whiskey. And Ireland didn't like the idea of grain whiskey, of single grain whiskey, to make blends. They turned down the idea to use column stills when they first came out. And the Scottish distilleries thought, this is a great way for us to use light grain whiskey to mix with our heavy malt whiskey, and we'll produce this lighter whiskey that will really suit America. So when America came out of Prohibition, the Scottish distilleries flooded America with cheap quality blends. And Ireland was determined to keep producing the high quality single pot still, and they just couldn't keep up with what the Scottish distilleries were doing. So it got so bad that in 1975, there were only 2 distilleries left working in Ireland. That was Middleton Distillery in East Cork and Bushmills Distillery in Northern Ireland. So it went from 88 distilleries down to 2. And if it wasn't for the people running Middleton Distillery and running Bushmills, if it wasn't for their imagination and foresight to know that Irish whiskey would become popular again, we wouldn't have any whiskey to drink here tonight. So we owe a great debt of gratitude to the folks that were running those distilleries and had the vision that Irish whiskey would rise again. So if we want to pour the next sample, this is sample number 5. I forgot that I didn't have a bottle of this at home, so I had to grab a sample before I left the distillery yesterday. And this little bottle it's actually, we use this for putting hand sanitizer in it. Because when we went into lockdown number 1, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we started making hand sanitizer. You make it from exactly the same alcohol that we use to make our gin. It's neutral spirit that we buy from a local dairy. Our gin is actually made from milk alcohol. There's no milk alcohol in the whiskey. The whiskey's all barley and corn. But yeah, the gin, we make it from milk alcohol, and we also use that same alcohol to produce hand sanitizer. So when the visitor centre closed, I moved with my team to our warehouse, and we were bottling and labelling hand sanitizer. I much prefer talking about whiskey. So thanks for letting me escape the warehouse and talk about whiskey. So sample number 5, this is getting confusing now. This whiskey is only available from the distillery shop. It's not part of our core range. It's a distillery shop exclusive. Very few bottles of this will have left Ireland. For a bottle to have got to Israel, I'm not even quite sure how we managed it. My courier can't get bottles from one end of Ireland to the other. No bother get them.
Perfect. You only use UPS. We're using FedEx here from all over the world, which is crap, you know. They're breaking bottles, they're sending them unpacked. It's use UPS.
UPS for me, when they get it right, it's amazing. They're cheap and they're fast. If something goes wrong, you don't want to try and phone their call center. You'll be on the phone for over an hour and they won't be able to tell you anything. So yeah, when it goes right, they're great. When it goes wrong, I've got samples. They've lost a box of samples in England at the moment. I can ship quicker to Israel than I can to England. Although, yeah, we'll see what they've just lost a box. Who knows? So this next one, folks, again, it's a blend of single malt whiskey and single grain whiskey. It is finished. They were both from American ex-bourbon barrels, but it's finished this time in cognac casks. It's bottled at 47% ABV. So because it's not part of our core range, we don't have any rules that we need to follow. So when Paul Corbett, head distiller and blender, was blending this, he tasted it until he thought it was at a good ABV for his palate. The other thing that makes this different, this is batch 2 of our cognac cask finish. We released batch 1 2 years ago. It was bottled in February 2019. This was bottled maybe 3 months ago, and it's from the same whiskey, if you like. So when Paul blended and he put the whiskey into casks for batch 1, he did double the amount of casks that he required. So this has actually been finished in cognac casks for 2 years, which is, again, unusual for an Irish whiskey. An Irish whiskey, a finish, you're normally talking 3 to 6 months. but this has been in the cask in the cognac casks for 2 years. It's also got older malt whiskey in it because we had a supply of older malt whiskey 2 years ago. It's all triple distilled. But this finish of 2 years, have a little nose of this, folks. It's tropical. It's melons and peaches, like stoned fruit, that kind of thing. Have a taste. Sláinte. For me, it's got more mouthfeel. It's fruity. Definitely tropical fruits. The 47% ABV really helps. It just brings it up. You know, I'm thinking, now we're talking. This is a proper whiskey. But it's not for everybody. I mean, if you're tasting this and you think, oh, it's just a little bit too fiery, a drop or two of water in it, just to see how that changes the whiskey. And I never thought to mention that earlier, that certainly, I mean, I'll dip my finger into a glass of water and just drop 1 or 2 drops from my finger into a glass. When I'm tasting, if I'm writing tasting notes for a whiskey, I'll do that because it can help to open up the aromas and the flavors of the whiskey. But I think this is amazing, and it's that extra bit of age. The 2-year finish is really, really helping it. Yeah, as I say, only available in the distillery shop. Although none of these whiskies at the moment are available to yourselves in Israel. That's something that we'll happily reconsider. It's really a case of a suitable importer and distributor coming to us and saying, I want to import your whiskey. We'll do it. Do you know, if the negotiation's right and they think there's a big enough market, that's partly how you've managed to get the whiskey tonight, is through our importer Dirk, based in the Netherlands. He's an incredible contact for me. The Irish whiskey community is a small community, but yeah, I met Dirk. He arrived at our distillery one day for a look around. I didn't know he was negotiating in the background to buy our whiskey, and 2 months later I was in The Hague in the Netherlands at a whiskey show doing a tasting with Dirk. He's got lots of enthusiasm, and he's managed to kind of get this together for us to all have a tasting tonight. So if there's a Dirk in Israel that wants to import our whiskey, then you know, that's definitely something that the owner will consider.
So just
if you all want to buy it.
So the guy that made this happen is not here today. He's working on his website right now. His name is Dirk. He's from the Netherlands. He made the contact between me and Ewan here, and he's the one that made this all happen. So we will say thank you to him, but he's not here. I'll say in person for him. Thank you for Dirk, and we'll have a sláinte for him as well.
I'm really looking forward to when we can all start traveling again and start to do tastings in person and actually meet each other rather than kind of this, which is quite odd. But then again, it allows me to talk to you all I'm not sure if I go to Michael Scully, our owner, and ask for a return flight to Israel to do a whiskey tasting. I'm not sure if he'll accept that or not. So it certainly allows us to do this.
Let us talk to him. He will accept it. Don't worry. We will talk to him and say we want you here in Israel for a front-to-front, face-to-face tasting. Yeah,
Definitely. Yeah.
The poitin. How do you call it in Irish? The new make.
Yeah. So the Irish word is poitín.
Poitín.
In Scotland, we would call it. I don't think we actually have a word for it. We would probably use in Scotland, it would have been called illicit whiskey or white whiskey, possibly. Nowadays, they might take the American term moonshine. But poitín was traditionally distilled illegally all across Ireland, especially in the west, especially in Cork and Kerry. And the name poitín, it means small pot. So a pot and chin is like small in Irish. And I don't speak Irish, so I'm not an expert, but that's where the name comes from, small pot. So they would have a small copper pot still heated by an open fire, something that could be moved quickly if the authorities arrived, and quite often made from potato skins or anything that they would have around to make it. Now, you've went frozen, but I hope everyone can still hear me. What I was actually going to do was see if I can get you inside the distillery if I share my screen again. Cool. Hopefully you can see this.
Yes, we can.
Cool. So the last sample that we have, that's why we don't have our own whiskey, because it's the new distillery. Yeah, it's a great facility. It's very efficient. It is all manually operated, although you can operate it from a control panel. So the computer doesn't decide on the processes. It's the distiller that makes a decision, but it's not labor intensive. They can use pumps and heat exchangers and solenoids and things to actually carry out the work. But the new make spirit is what I would call this poitín in the whiskey world. We don't sell this. We have thought about bottling it as poitín, but we've not done that yet. At the moment, all of this goes into barrels at the warehouse. And I quickly just wanted to show you inside the distillery, because this is where this liquid came from. This was distilled here. The floor above the image that you're looking at, we have a mill that came from Switzerland, and that grinds up the malted barley and the unmalted barley, the raw barley, because the spirit that you've got is pot still spirit. It's not a single malt, it's not a single grain, it's single pot still. This is the Irish style. So the tank on the right here is what we call a mash conversion vessel. It cooks the malted barley and the raw barley a little bit to start the conversion of the starch into sugar. Then we pump it into this, which is our lauter tun. The lauter tun separates the liquids from the solids. So we've now got a sugary wort. We pump the sugary wort over into one of our washbacks These are our fermentation tanks. We have 8 of these. This is where we add the third and final ingredients of yeast. So it's only water, barley, and yeast. The yeast will eat the sugar and produce alcohol, and we will get up to around 8% ABV in the wash that we're producing in the washbacks. Fermentation in Clonakilty distillery is around 5 days, so it's quite a long fermentation time. And then from one washback, we will put it into the first of our 3 stills. The still on this contraption on the right-hand side is our gin still, so ignore that. We've got the steps to our stills. The stills were made in Italy, a company called Barrison. This is the first still, the wash still, 7,000 litres. So it'll take the contents of one washback. You need to do 2 runs of that to be able to fill the second still, which we call the intermediate still. We have quite tall necks on the stills, and the tall necks are there to encourage a phenomenon called reflux. Reflux is where the heavy, oily components of the vapor condense early and they fall back down into the still. So it means you're only getting the light, delicate vapor reaching the top of the still. And then this is our spirit still here. So this is the third distillation, triple distilled pot still spirit, a tall neck. And if you look at this arm here, connecting the still to the condenser, the line arm that we call it on the spirit still, it's pointing upwards. And it's designed like that to encourage this action of reflux. So the only vapor that gets to the condenser is the light, delicate vapor. The first 2 line arms of the other ones are pointing slightly downwards, but the spirit still points up. From the spirit still, the spirit runs through the spirit safe, which is just there. There's the spirit safe, and then it runs down through hole in the floor to be collected into a tank, and then it gets taken out to our warehouse, which sits on the coast. It's about 20 minutes drive. So that's the distillery. It's in a nice modern building, and if you do get the chance to come and visit in Ireland, you get right up and close to all of this. You get to see it all happening. So it's a really nice facility that we have. I'll get rid of that
this is the
again.
closest things to get into the distillery. This is perfect. This is
I thought that was, I'm glad that the technology works. During lockdown, we got a photographer in to do that 360-degree photography, and it's great for this because I can take you inside the distillery without me being there, because if I was there, I wouldn't be able to have a whiskey and need to drive home. So yeah, have a little nose of the new. Now remember, this is malted barley and unmalted barley. I'm going to try and switch my internet because I have lost all of you. So give me a second just till I try and switch this over, in case anyone's asking me. Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes, we do. We can hear you. Yes.
Cool. I'm starting to see people appearing again. Cool. So yeah, this is, you can smell a bit of that.
What's that? What's that?
So this is the last
What's
one.
that?
This is the last one.
The one.
The chain. Yeah, the white one, the clear one. Yeah.
The new make.
Number one. Yeah, new make.
Okay. 1 minute, please.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, pour the new make into your glass.
I wash the glass. Man.
This is distilled in Clonakilty. It's single pot still, which means it's made from malted barley and unmalted barley. Now, when you're distilling pot still whiskey, the rules are that you must use a minimum of 30% malted barley. You must use a minimum of 30% unmalted barley, and the rest can be either malted or unmalted. So when we started distilling, we did 50-50 malt and 50% raw. Then we changed it to 70% raw and 30% malt, and then we changed it the other way. And now what we're doing is 60% malted barley and 40% raw barley. That's what you've got in your glass. By changing the mash bill, it means when it comes to creating the whiskies in another 2 or 3 years' time, we will have all these different distillates that we can blend together, we can share them. So yeah, it means that we're creating something different every so often. Now, the sample that I sent you is 58% ABV. When it comes off our spirit still, it's coming off about 82% ABV. Most distilleries will dilute the spirit from the still down to around 63% ABV. And we're doing that for most of our barrels. However, some barrels, especially virgin American oak, if you put spirit in them that's too high ABV, it can burn. You get a phenomenon called spirit burn. It'll burn the wood. So if we're filling virgin American oak barrels, Paul will bring the ABV down a little bit more to 58, and that's what you've got in your glass. So if you've not tasted white spirit or Pachin before, be careful. This is strong, but have a nose and have a sip. It's fruity.
Totally different from Scotch new make. This is nice. It's sweeter. It has more mouthfeel. It's
mouthfeel.
Yes.
That's the raw barley. It's oily. It coats your mouth. There's flavors like blackberries or blueberries in it. It's a little bit grassy, but it's not harsh. I mean, if you gave me a sample of that and asked me to taste it, I wouldn't guess it was at 58%. It smells like a traditional Irish poutine. And the only way you can get traditional Irish poutine is by knowing someone that knows someone that knows someone. That's how you get it. You never actually get to find out where it's from. The smell's the same, but this is much more refined. It's got more character. It's not just about alcohol. It's about the flavor. You can see why this won Best New Make in Ireland 2020. It's a beautiful whiskey, beautiful spirit, not a whiskey yet. It needs to be in the barrels for 3 years. And yeah, comes off the stills clear. It looks like water. And in the Irish language, the name for whiskey is Ishkabaha. Ishka being water, and Baha being life. The water of life is what they call whiskey or Pachin. So yeah, Sloncha, enjoy a drop of the good stuff.
This is actually something I would buy for myself for not a daily consumption, let's say, but at the end of a week or something like this, to sit with something like this, it will be probably perfect for me at least.
Yeah, and we're thinking about it. It's becoming a little bit more popular in Ireland now, Pachin, legal Pachin. And there is now a bar in Dublin that is a specialist Pachin bar. You can go in and get a flight of different Pachins. They make a cocktail, but instead of it's a spin on an Irish coffee. So instead of using hot coffee, sugar, whiskey, and cream, they make what they call a Belfast coffee. It's a cold filtered coffee, slow cold filtered. They add a measure of Pachin, and then they have some sugar in it, and they top that with cream. So it's a cold coffee Pachin cocktail, and it is amazing. It's a beautiful drink. So a lot of bartenders, a lot of mixologists are keen to use Pachin in their cocktails because it's proper Irish. Do you know, it's what would have been consumed in Ireland for hundreds of years.
I heard a lot of bartenders and, as you say, mixologists that use, instead of gin, they use a new make or pochin, actually. So yeah. I believe this is much more my personal taste, you know, this is more tasteful than any gin that I've tasted. Because maybe I don't like the more, no, it's like vegetables or plants.
Yeah.
This is more
what we'd call botanicals, plants, yes, used in. One of my favorite whiskey quotes of all time was from 3 years ago. I was at a tasting for Powers Whiskey, and their brand ambassador stopped a girl coming into the room that was carrying a gin glass. He said, "No, I don't allow gin into my tastings." He was just joking, but his comment was, "What you have there is just unaged whiskey with flowers in it," which I thought was quite good because it almost is. It's more vodka with flowers in it, is truthfully what gin is. It's incredibly popular in Ireland just now, gin. For the last 4 years, gin has been massive, and you can open a gin distillery easily. Gin is very easy to distill because you start with alcohol at 96%, so you can't really make anything dangerous. You water it down, you add juniper berries, whatever other plants you like, and you redistill it. So it's very easy. You don't need to mature it. So you can sell it straight away, and it's a revenue stream, as well as the visitor centre and the sourced whiskey that you've tasted. But this is the future. The new make spirit is the future. Now, we first filled a barrel in May 2019. So that will be whiskey in May 2022. To think about that there. But we probably won't release it because a 3-year-old Irish whiskey is still quite raw. It needs 5 or 6 years before it's something that you would be proud of. So we won't release it until it's ready. What I'm hoping will happen though is that when we're tasting different casks in the warehouse, we might find one that has aged a little bit quicker, something special, and we'd be able to bottle a single cask. And that's definitely what the whiskey collectors, the collectors of Irish whiskey want. They want a single cask from a distillery that hasn't released anything else. They'll be able to buy it for €100, and in 2 weeks' time, they'll be able to sell it on an auction for €1,000. That's one of the...
I'd like to know about this, but we won't sell it. We want to drink it.
I'll put you on the list, okay? So folks, that's Clonakilty Distillery. It's the whiskey that we've got just now, which is sourced. It's the new make spirit, which is the future. And yeah, it's been great fun for me to talk to you. I hope the timing's been about right.
We don't talk about time when we talk about whiskey.
Cool, yeah, that suits me as well. When I moved from Scotland, it took me 3 years to move from Scottish time to Irish time. I used to get really worried about, my girlfriend would be saying, we better go, we're going to be late for the party or late for dinner. And she was like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, but this time's already passed. No, they are so relaxed. It took me 3 years to get relaxed into Irish time.
So there is only 1 hour difference between Irish and Scotland. No, it's not more than this. When we're talking about time.
Yeah, there's 2 hours difference between me and you. There's about a year's difference between Scotland and Ireland.
How many again?
There's 1 year difference.
Oh. People are more, settled down, more easygoing.
Yeah.
That's good.
I'm just going to quickly, before I take any questions, I did have a map. I'm looking for a map to see. Oh yeah, there it is.
Guys, this is, חבר'ה, I'll switch to Hebrew right now. זה זמן מצוין לשאלות, חבר'ה. מי שרוצה להעלות שאלות עכשיו, או שישלח לי בוואטסאפ ואני אשאל, או שישאל את יואן ישירות.
Can you see the maps?
Yes, we can.
Cool. So down here, number 17, that's Clonakilty Distillery. That's where I am. Dublin is here with the cluster of distilleries.
Teeling and
yeah, Teeling are there. The Dublin Liberties Distillery, Pierce Lyons Distillery, Rowan Co.
Middleton is also in Dublin?
Yeah, so no. And up until 2 years ago, if you bought a bottle of Jameson, it would say Bow Street, Dublin.
Yes.
The original Jameson distillery was in Dublin. It was in Bow Street. But in 1975, it closed. They amalgamated with Cork Distillers Limited. So Powers Whiskey, Jameson Whiskey, and Paddy's Whiskey all came together, and they built a new distillery in Middleton, which is number 16. So that 25 is down here. So it's the biggest distillery in Ireland. They don't, when you visit, they don't let you into the real distillery. They let you into the old distillery. So it's more of a visitor attraction than it is a distillery, but they've got some cool stuff to see. They've got the biggest pot still in the world on show there, which is in the old distillery. And it's about an hour's drive from Middleton down to ourselves in Clonakilty. And then this other map, you can see the Atlantic Ocean here. There is an estuary, comes up right to the point where the distillery is here. And then the blue line is the route to drive from our distillery out to our warehouse on Michael Scully's farm. So the warehouse is 200 metres from the cliff. It's 200 metres from the Atlantic Ocean. It's on the farm, and that's where the new make spirit is maturing into whiskey. And out here, just at the side of this bay, that's where Michael is growing barley. And the barley that he's growing, we're using as the raw barley in our new make spirit. So you're drinking barley from a field on the coast of Ireland there. So yeah, that's where we are. The big map, Irish Whiskey 360. Irish Whiskey 360 is part of the Irish Whiskey Association, and they're trying to promote whiskey tourism in Ireland. On the map, there are 20 distilleries. That's the 20 distilleries that have visitor centres open, but it's out of date already. There are even more distilleries opening up with visitor centres. So you could go all around Ireland on a 2-week Israel's South Coast Whisky Society road trip.
Could you please say a few words maybe about the retail price of all the whiskies that we have tried this evening, please? So people would be more, knowledgeable about what we are.
Yeah. So the first 3 whiskies, so sample 2, 3, and 4, they are all around €50. Irish whiskey tends to be a little more expensive than Scotch whiskey. Partly is because of the rarity of it. We just don't have the same volume that the Scotch industry has. And also in Ireland.
You can see it perfectly in Israel because the quantities of new make and the whiskey that's produced is very low. And this is the reason why the whiskey is more expensive. So probably it's something that's very close between Israel and Ireland, because you don't have a lot of quantity that's going on the market. Yeah.
The other problem is Ireland, Irish people are known for enjoying a drink and enjoying a party and a bit of crack, as they say in Ireland. So what the government have done over the years have taxed alcohol highly. So Ireland has got the 2nd highest excise duty on alcohol, the 2nd highest in Europe. Only Finland are higher than Ireland. So if you buy a bottle of our whiskey at €50, I think it's something like €12 is excise duty. And we've got 21% VAT, 21% tax. So 21% goes to the government and an extra €12 goes to the government for alcohol duty to try and stop us drinking more. And there's a lot of legislation coming into Ireland at the moment to try and reduce the amount of alcohol that the Irish consume. You're no longer.
Another question here regarding all the batches that are produced and out on the market. Maybe you can say how many bottles were produced from each one of the expressions that we tried. Maybe roughly or precisely, I don't know.
Cool. Yeah, not precisely.
Okay.
It's a bit of a guesstimate. So the double oak is around 1,500 bottles per batch, and we are now on batch 15, I think. So 15 times 1,500.
Yes. Okay.
The single grain Bordeaux cask finish, yeah, we'll say roughly they're about 1,500 per batch. Single grain, we have done 9 batches. The port cask finish, 1,500 a batch. I think we're on 20 batches, could be wrong, but in and around that. And yeah, the cognac cask. Say again?
This is actually more than I expected. I thought it will be less. I thought about 5 to 10 batches, you know, something like this.
Yeah, no, it's more, but the whiskey was first released 3 years ago. So yeah, before the distillery opened, we had the sourced whiskey on the market. So 3 years of whiskey sales. We bottle ourselves, and I've said that a lot of Irish distilleries use a bottling company. We do it all in-house. Up at the warehouse on the coast, we have our own bottling facility. If you want to bottle efficiently, it takes 3 or 4 people to do it. It's quite manual. It's not a big automated line. And they could bottle, on a good day, they could do 1 batch. They could bottle 1,500 bottles of whiskey on a good day. So we're certainly not the smallest. There are a lot smaller companies, distilleries than ourselves, but we're certainly not the biggest. In terms of new make spirit, we probably fill around 10 barrels a week, 100-litre ex-bourbon barrels. But at the moment, we operate the distillery Monday to Friday from about 8 o'clock in the morning to maybe 8 o'clock at night. We are looking to increase that. We need to get a bigger boiler fitted. The boiler spec that they got originally isn't big enough to run all 3 stills simultaneously. So we need a bigger boiler, and that will allow us to go to 7 days production, and it will allow us to extend the day slightly. But a new boiler, it's going to cost us a 6-figure sum in euros. They're not cheap. Any questions?
The distillery exclusive, how many bottles? Around 600, I believe. No, I think so.
Oh.
This is what I remember from the bottle itself.
Yeah.
No, it's less than 1,500 for sure.
Yeah, or it might be 1,000. That rings a bell. 1,000, and that's only the second batch. So there's less than 2,000 bottles.
Yeah, the cognac, yes.
That's in terms of age of the whiskey, that's the oldest tonight because it's spent longer in the barrels. I see a comment there, someone saying that 4 is nice. Yeah, I think 4 is my favorite out of these. And yeah, someone saying they learned so much. Yeah, listen, I'm a whiskey geek first and foremost. I am so fortunate to have got a job working in a distillery.
We all dream of something like this, you know.
Yeah, I know. And when I didn't work in Scotch whisky, I was an electrical engineer in Scotland. I worked with the electricity company for 24 years. I met an Irish girl, which is a good reason to move to Ireland. And I wanted to try something different. So I worked in a shop for 2 years. And then I worked in the local airports in Cork in the duty-free shop selling whiskey. And because I got a Scottish accent, everyone thought I was an expert. And I didn't tell them that I wasn't an expert. And then I seen Clonakilty distillery getting built. And I contacted them to say, I want to come and work for you because that looks really cool. and that was 2 years ago. So yeah, it's a family business. This isn't a big international drinks company. It's not Diageo or Pernod Ricard. This is an independent, family-owned distillery. I will meet the owner every day that I'm in the distillery. If there's a problem, if anyone's got an idea, I don't need to send an email. I can go and talk to them. So yeah, it's a small business, and none of the team had to be unemployed when the pandemic came in. All the full-time staff were offered the chance to go to the warehouse and be involved in hand sanitizer bottling or whiskey bottling or gin bottling. So that's special for to go through the pandemic like we're going through. There's not many people in the drinks industry that haven't been affected by it. What it does mean is as soon as the restrictions are lifted here, I can reopen the visitor centre because my staff are still working in the company. I don't need to hire. I've got my team ready. The warehouse will need to go and get casual staff to bottle their whiskey because I want my staff back.
So this is maybe the time, I'll switch again to Hebrew. חבר'ה, זה הזמן אולי להגיד בפני Ewan here מה הבחירה שלכם, מה היה הכי טעים, מה הכי פחות אהבתם, מה יותר אהבתם. כל פידבק אני בטוח שיתקבל בברכה, אם הם לא בוחלים בשום אמצעים ואין להם שום בעיה לקבל כל ביקורת. אז תנו בראש חבר'ה. They will give you maybe some of their input. אביתר.
אני אתחיל. אני אנסה ככה לרכז את אני אגיד בעברית, אסף, תרגם לו אחרי זה.
I will translate English.
בסדר? אני אנסה ככה, היינו 3 בשולחן, אני, חן ואבירן, אני אנסה ככה לעשות את זה ממוצע. אז
same table that we're tasting the products. Yeah.
Say that again, Azaf.
3 guys at the same table that tasted all your expressions.
2 מספר 1, נכון?
כן.
יש פה מחלוקת בין 5 ל-2. עד שהגענו ל-5. עד שהגענו ל-5, 2 היה מספר 1. כשהגענו ל-5, יש לנו פה 2 מול 1. אז זה תיקו 2 על 5.
2 and 5 are the best for them.
אחרי זה כמובן 2, אחרי זה יש מחלוקת בין 3 ל-4, אבל 4 סליחה יותר גבוה, לאחר מכן 3, ואני היחיד שאהב את 1.
One is the least favorite, but 3 and 4 there is a kind of, you know, the mixed emotions about them.
Okay.
Now you see he's drunk.
So do you mean
West?
Wait 1 second. תחכו שנייה רגע, הוא רוצה להגיד משהו? Go ahead then.
Was it the first whiskey that was least favorite? Number 2 or was
Number 2.
Okay, cool. Yeah, cool.
מתי יהיה בארץ אז מספר 2? זו השאלה.
No. Look. This one, this guy, and the other one, like the double rock. The second one.
Oh, okay. This is what I love about whiskey tasting, because everyone tastes differently. Everyone has a different opinion. I love sitting in a room with people and someone will go, that's terrible, I hate, and it might be my favourite out of the night, and then you have a chat about it and you get to learn the types of whiskey you like, and then when you're buying one, you get an idea what to look for. Is it American or do you like forecasts? Is it young whiskey? Is it old whiskey? Yeah, it's great. Cool.
last one, we want...
אני רק רוצה עוד מילה, אסף, חשוב מאוד לציין את העניין הזה שמדובר בוויסקיז מאוד מאוד צעירים, זה באופן יחסי, כן, למה שאנחנו כבר שתינו בחיים, ולא היה אף בקבוק שהוא בלתי נסבל. כולם היו מאוד מאוד טעימים, מאוד מאוד נעימים, למרות שהם צעירים, מאוד מאוד עשירים, מחכים שיגיעו לארץ.
So what he's saying is it's because it's everybody was surprised because it's relatively young whiskey and they expected, you know, less, but they get more than they thought about. So they got more than they expected. This is good.
Yeah, that's good to hear because I did a whiskey tasting in Scotland 2 years ago, but we were tasting Irish whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult to compete with Scottish distilleries that have got, all of their whiskies are a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old. It's difficult to compete. But if you come to an Irish whiskey tasting with an open mind and let your taste buds decide, then you can be surprised. And yeah, just imagine what Irish whiskey is going to be like in 5 years or 10 years' time when all of these distilleries have got their own whiskey ready and it's all got a little bit more maturity. If this is what they can do with young whiskey, imagine what it's going to be like when there's 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 21-year-olds available for us.
Question from my girlfriend. You can't see her right now, but...
Hi. I have a question. First of all, thank you. It was very nice. I wanted to know, what is your favorite expression? Ewan?
My favorite is I heard that. So my favorite, the cognac cask finish.
Okay.
But I wouldn't drink that as much as I drink the single batch double oak.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's easier to enjoy. I mean, if you want a whiskey for breakfast, it's the single batch double. Whiskey after dinner, it's the cognac finish.
One last question, guys. One last question. Anyone? So there's no more questions. So from South Coast Whiskey Society, we all thank you. It was amazing. We were all probably surprised by these whiskey. They're amazing for, as you said, there's a lot of potential, and we think that in the future it will be even more better than what we drink right now. For a young whiskey, this is good, very nice. In the next few years, it probably will be perfect. So we thank you, and we probably want to meet you in person in Ireland when we'll do a distillery tour, you know. So remember us, and we will visit.
Yeah, I would love to welcome you to see around the distillery in person. And if my boss is willing to pay for me to visit Israel, yeah, I'd love to come over and do a tasting in person. I'll bring the bottles with me as well.
Oh, no. Now we're talking, man. Now we're talking.
I'll take orders from anyone that wants to buy.
You will have to send me. Thank you. You will also have to send bottles for us for Israel. We will talk about getting your stuff here to Israel.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and have a wonderful weekend.
Very nice. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thanks very much, everyone.
Very much.
Cheers.
See you, Ewan. Don't go away, guys. אל תלכו, חבר'ה, יש לי עוד איזושהי הכרזה קטנה, חבר'ה.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
אל תלכו עדיין, יש לי עוד איזשהו משהו קטן להגיד, חבר'ה. בסדר? Owen, see you, man.
Cool. Will I hand you host again?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Keep safe.
Hold on.
Stay safe, man.
Do you have host now, Azaf?
Yes. No, it doesn't matter. Wait. No, you're still host, man.
I'll see if I can get it to work. Oh, here we go.
No? Yes. Wait. Yes, I'm the host. You, man.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, man. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
חבר'ה, אתם שומעים אותי?
כל מילה.
יותר ממה שהיינו רוצים.
אלינו היום הכרזה בקבוצה של השיר הבא שלנו. תביא לי את הבקבוקים שלנו.
טוב, לא, אמרתי לך.
כן, שנייה, נראה לי אני צריך להוריד את הרקע, זה קצת מפריע.
זה משגע, רגע.
כן, שנייה, אני אוריד את זה ונראה לי שתוכלו לראות.
לא בקבוצה, הוא לא בקבוצה. הוא לא העלה את זה, רק הכרזה, יום שני יהיו הפייבוקסים.
לא, חבר'ה, הפייבוקסים הם מתוכננים לחבר'ה למחר, לא ליום שני. הפייבוקס יהיה פתוח עד יום שני. אז...
אוקיי. תעשו קישור לזה.
נעשה קישור מחר.
באיזה שעה, אסף?
מחר לפני כניסת השבת. זה אומר בסביבות, נגיד, 3:30, 4, שי, מתי נכנסת השבת מחר?
לא, אתה צריך יותר מוקדם.
50.
מתי?
שבת נכנסת ב4:45 בערך.
4:45, מצוין, בסביבות 4:30, 4:15 כזה ככה, אנחנו נפתח את הזה, אבל נוציא כמובן, זה נגיד...
לא, אחי, דתיים לא יספיקו. אסף, דתיים מתארגנים לשבת, הם לא יספיקו. ככה זה יום קצר מחר.
מבחינתכם לפתוח את זה בסביבות 3:30, או שלא טוב?
3 זה סבבה.
תפתח את זה יותר מוקדם.
חבר'ה, זה משהו ש...
תפתח באזור 2.
באזור 2?
שעה וחצי לפני שבת.
אל תשכח מחר שבת, אסף. נו.
טוב, אז נפתח את זה בשעה 2, חבר'ה, אני באמת, ארבעת הביטויים שיש פה, עם ה-Israel Choice, שזה באמת בקבוק שלא יצא לכם לטעום הרבה, זה דברים שהם מאוד מאוד מיוחדים.
רק למי שיש בקבוק שלם ממנו.
והתכוון לפתוח אותו. זה... הדברים האלה...
גם אתה לוקח בקבוק, רגע.
להשקעה, חבר'ה. זה גם בקטע של השקעה.
זה הבקבוקים האלה של המינטין אז? כן.
חבר'ה, זה 3 הבצ'ים הראשונים.
מילה פה.
אתם שומעים?
זה 400 שקל בקבוק.
זה 3 הביטויים הראשונים של הביטוי הזה ממילקן-הני. אייפקס, כאילו מי שיודע באנגלית, זה הקליימקס, זה המקסימום, זה הטוב ביותר, והם עשו פה דברים משוגעים. יהיה רק 50 מיל לכל בן אדם, בשלב הראשון יהיה 1 לכל בן אדם, ואם אנחנו נראה שיהיה את האפשרות, אנחנו נפתח את זה ליותר. אז אל תפספסו את זה.
חבר'ה, אני ארים לחיים לכבוד זה.
אבל נגמר לה...
בילוי נעים, תומר.
מה?
יאללה, חבר'ה.
חבר'ה, לילה טוב.
יש לנו גם.
לילה טוב.
לילה טוב.
להתראות, חברים.
הילה ואסף, לילה טוב.
ביי חברים, להתראות, לילה טוב.
זה מה שיש בעבודה, חבר'ה, זה מה שיש בעבודה.
תומר,
ממש מודל לחיתוי.
ביי.
ביי חברים.
למה ביי? למה?
אתה רוצה להישאר עוד? לחיים.
נשאר עוד כוסי.
רגע, היא מערבבת את זה עם קולה?
וואי, אתה נכנס פה בין כניסה.
הרופא.
חבר'ה, עוד דבר אחד אחרון, לפני שמסיימים, השיחה, כאילו כל האירוע מוקלט, אנחנו נעלה את זה ליוטיוב, לערוץ החדש שלנו, stay tuned. יאללה חבר'ה, לילה טוב, אני הולך לאכול, לא אכלתי כלום כל
ביי ביי. תבון.
לילה טוב.
יש כבר מנגל.
ביי חברים, ביי.